Good evening. Well, we're on to part 2 of my video series about Christian violence. And this is talking about from the Crusades onto the early 1900s. This is 900 years of utter brutality and death. And this was a very hard video for me to make. Because this is the part where I got so angry with Christianity. It's one of the reasons why I am no longer a Christian. And so I'm making this video not to dwell upon old memories. I am making this video to educate people on the atrocities of the Abrahamic religions, because the events that are happening today in our modern world happened before. And then there is that old adage, those who do not learn from their past are doomed to repeat it. And I don't want to repeat this. So, in the early thousands, 10,095, through roughly the 1300s, there was a series of crusades. Now, a lot of people are going to hear that there was 9 crusades, and that is wrong. There were 13 crusades. You see, there is what is called like the Northern Crusade, which is a crusade in the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But it was a crusade. You see, not all of the crusades were against the Muslims. What people need to realize, the Crusades were against anyone that did not follow the Catholic line. So if you were a pagan, you were a target. If you were a Jew, you were a target. If you were a Muslim, you were a target. It is that simple. And that is one of the reasons why Christianity is one of the bloodiest religions in the history of man. So the first crusade was commanded by Pope Urban II. He wanted soldiers to go down and liberate Jerusalem because he saw it as a holy city. It was a Christian holy city, not a Jewish, not a Muslim, just Christian. On July 10th of that year in Anjou, France, crusading monks trampled 3,000 Jews to death and destroyed the community. In other words, monks, supposedly Christian religious people, went to this village and wiped it out. They were doing it for God. There's that little thing they like to call the commandments, thou shalt not kill. In 1257, Jewish communities in London, Canterbury, Northampton, Lincoln, Cambridge, and others were exterminated. Not just attacked, looted, but exterminated. And in 1290, in Bohemian Poland, allegedly 10,000 Jews were killed as well. Now, you see, Christians are not a very forgiving people. They are vindictive. We have the massacre at Prague in Bohemia. A priest was hit with a few grains of sand or grains of corn, nothing major, by a small Jewish boy playing in the streets. This insulted this priest, and so he insisted that this boy be punished in front of the parents. And the community got involved. They got a mob together and they attacked the ghetto. Thousands were slaughtered. The synagogue and the cemetery were destroyed. All because of one man. Got a few grains of sand or pebbles, hit him. 1478, November 1st, Pope Sixtus VI of Spain, at the request of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, issued a bull empowering the establishment of the Inquisitional Tribune to investigate charges of heresy, also known as the Spanish Inquisition. You see, people were forced to where they had to either convert or die. And so there were many Jews and pagans that said, okay, I convert, but were secretly, following their old ways. They were trying to stay true to their path. And so these inquisitors were sent out to investigate and find all these people that are not following the true Christian manners and have them punished. A few years later, in 1484, the burning time started. The witches, what they claim is witches, people that performed any type of unknown healings and such, were classified as witches. And according to modern scholars, before this time, several thousand witches were killed. But once the era of the witch hunting began, we're talking 1484 to 1750, several 100,000 people were killed because they were supposed witches. Most of these were females. This again is because the Christians wanted to empower men, and so they victimized women. They made them into the root of all evil. They created a second-class society of females. It gave it trained men early about wanting power because they were given power over women. And it is a shame. Many of these people were burned at the stake, which means they were burnt alive, or they were hanged. The Maleficorum was Pope Innocent VIII's infamous witch book, which he used as a guideline for hunting down witches. The interesting thing about this, and I use the word interesting very loosely here, we see in the castles of all the torture devices that they have, the Iron Maiden, the rack, thumb screws, and all that. Those were invented to get confessions of being a witch out. They weren't used on political prisoners. No, they weren't used on, enemy soldiers. They were used on people to get the confessions that I'm a witch out of them. Isn't that wonderful? Now, the policy of torturing, burning, and hanging supposed heretics has been the church's policy for centuries. Wherever they can get away with it, they did it. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, about 500,000 people were executed for witchcraft, most of them women. And this is the sad thing about this. This is the hatred in Christianity that I'm trying to express here. One of the dark points in human history is the Black Death, which is recorded between 1346 and 1353. This is a time period where the plague came through Europe and killed between 75 and 200 million people. Now, how was this connected to Christianity? Christianity was in power all over Europe, and the church was telling people who to blame. Christians targeted the Jews. They were accusing the Jews of poisoning wells, of doing foul things. And so in 1351, over 200 Jewish communities were destroyed in Europe. In 1 year, over 200 communities destroyed. I mean, that is just sad. They are looking for somebody to blame because they had no answers, and they go out and they kill people. But the Pope wasn't that great of a person. The Pope ordered that cats be killed because cats were considered the familiars of witches, and they thought that foul magic was involved. They thought that the witches were condemning wells, and anybody who drank from that well would get the plague and die. So they killed the cats. And that was stupid. It made the situation worse. And why? Because the plague was carried not by insects, but also by rats, vermin. And what killed rats? But cats. So the church's closed-minded views made the plague worse. Talk about divine intervention. The discovery of the New World didn't help much either. It made things worse. When Columbus made it to the Caribbean islands, he was enforcing Catholic doctrine on these islands. He was taking people as prisoners, and anybody who opposed him was killed. That's fact. I find it highly irritating when people want to celebrate Columbus Day. Let's celebrate somebody who committed genocide. But this did not happen just in the Caribbean. This was a worldwide epidemic. It was in 1498 when the Indians from India, Hindus, first had major contact with Christianity. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese, landed with gunboats and priests, and in 1498 to invade and subjugate all the countries which were under the rule of the enemies of Christ. That's right. If your country was not Christian, you were an enemy, and you had to be conquered. There's that love and peace I keep hearing about. In the same year of 1498, April 19th through the 21st, in Lisbon, Portugal, there was an incident in which some people thought they saw a vision in one of the statues. Outside, a newly converted Jew raised doubts about the miracle. He and the devout Christians literally tore him apart and burnt his body. The crowd, led by two Dominican monks, proceeded to ransack Jewish houses and kill any Jews they could find. During the next few days, countrymen, hearing about the massacres, came to Lisbon to join in. Over 2,000 Jews were killed in these 3 days. Thou shalt not kill. In 1568, the Spanish Inquisition Tribunal ordered the extermination of 3 million rebels in the Netherlands. Thousands were slain. The Netherlands was a Protestant state. They were opposing Spanish rule, and thus they were considered heretics, and they must die. In 1572, in France, about 20,000 Huguenots were killed on command of Pope Pius V. By the 17th century, 200,000 had already fled. You see, this is the violence that is still there. It's never gone away. It's never went down. Wherever Christianity rears its ugly head, death is not that far behind. The American colonists, in the New England area, They were not much better. They were just as bad as Columbus and all the other Christians that came and went. Most of these small tribes in the New England, they lost roughly 90% of their population due to smallpox epidemics and to the violence of the English colonists. The English colonists were intentionally breaking treaties. They knew that they will never hold true to any treaty. They stole, they killed. I mentioned this in one of my videos about Thanksgiving, about the Corn Lady dance, if I remember right, in which the English colonists went and they killed a whole village of Native Americans. They shot any person who came out of their tents and burned the rest of the tents down, killing men, women, and children. Nobody lived. Just so that they can steal the grain and all that, because it's easier to steal than to create it yourself. This is a reference to the 30 Years' War, where the Protestants were rebelling against the Catholic rule. The Catholics had the strong Spanish army, and they were slaughtering villages. And if it wasn't for Sweden, which was a Protestant nation, coming to the aid, the Catholics would have won. And that's a highlight here. It was the 30 Years' War where we entered the age of modern warfare. The 30 Years' War is a pivotal moment in the history of man. That is when we entered the modern time period of killing each other. The Swedish king, Gustavus Adolphus, is considered the father of the modern military. He devised his units into smaller, more mobile units, and thus made it more efficient and more ability to kill larger groups of people. He is praised for his intelligence, but hey, thank you for showing us how to kill more people. Whole villages were slaughtered in Germany, and that is a shame. In 1864, we had the massacre at Sand Creek in Colorado. A former Methodist minister and still elder in the church led an attack on a Cheyenne village that killed 600 people, mostly women and children, gunned down despite the chiefs waving a white flag. They were literally giving up. They were not trying to oppose. In the reference that I was able to find, they mentioned that they had a hole where they had 30 to 40 women and children in there trying to hide them, trying to protect them so they don't get shot. They sent out a little girl, like, 6 years old, with a white flag on a stick, and from this hole, she didn't even make it 6 steps. They shot her. These white Christian men came up and they shot everybody in that hole. They killed unarmed people because these Native Americans in their eyes were savages because they were not Christian. And that is what I'm against here. We do not see the brutality of Christianity because the media will not tell us of everything that goes on in the world. We need to open up our eyes and see that it's not just the Muslims that are killing people now. The Christians are still killing people. So thank you for listening to part 2 of The Violence of Christianity. Part 3, The Modern Times, shall be coming out soon. Thank you. Be at peace.